The sketchbook is where the manifestations of my tangential, overactive mind and joy of mark making couple and spawn, harnessing the chaos of imagination and observation in a private, free space, free from the pressures of serious, finished work, prying eyes, or concerns of perception, a realm of play and growth where concept and actualization spill out onto the page. Euphoric exercises and explicit explorations, nonsense logic, an automatic and unapologetic response to the inner workings of my person. Incorrectly Anatomical is a brief foray into 2 decades-long practice of consistently keeping sketchbooks, focusing on the last 5 years and spanning 7 books in total.
Oh yeah, sick.
So I don't know, Nate, you want to introduce yourself briefly, I guess? Or
Yeah, sure.
what are you up to? How's your day?
My day's been going. It's Monday. Back to work. I mean, I work last week.
What kind of work do you do?
I work at Frame Shop, so it's
Okay.
kind of like high-end stuff for like big galleries, a lot of like private clients that have like some kind of insane collections. So I get to see some cool stuff and some hot garbage. So it's like, broad spectrum.
You're like, I just finished framing up this Mr. Brainwash piece. Like, sick, dude.
Yeah, I think I actually have worked on some Mr. Brainwash, but I get to handle like Klimt sketches and
Wow,
some other,
that's
like
awesome.
insane stuff. So
Just seeing that up
yeah,
close.
I get to touch it. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that, but like I didn't say what frame shop I work for. But
Right. There's so many of them. They're like indestructible.
Yeah.
They like all survived COVID. They all survived recessions. Like
I
frame
mean,
shops are invincible.
It's like kind of like connected to like I kind of describe the art world as like the original crypto because it's like just money laundering and like
You're
just
absolutely
like
right.
totally like people like buy up a collection, sit on it, and then like someone says like, hey, check out my whatever, and they're like, well, this rich guy's got it, so I got to get one too. So then they can just flip their collection later on. So
Yeah,
it's
all
interesting.
insider trading.
Yeah, totally. It's just a funny way that.
Well, it's an unregulated financial field, right? So you're
right,
like, you have the art, you have the gallery. I'm going to buy all the art off you. I'm going to show it in your gallery. You're going to write the insurance for it.
Yeah.
So you write the insurance for his gallery. I buy all the stuff and show it through his gallery. We all get rich.
Yeah, totally.
And then
The artist is like, haha, look, I'm
dead.
famous now, and I'm dead.
yeah, exactly. And that's when they really make money.
Yeah.
They're like,
Well, Richard
Excellent.
Serra was a client of ours, and like when he passed recently, like it like just kind of floodgates open on people trying to sell work and stuff. So it was like kind of like wild to.
It's a bummer.
It's kind of gross because
That
you're
is
like,
really
oh,
gross.
It is a bummer.
we liked working with him, and his work is like
He seemed cool.
pretty awesome. So
That's why books are, what do Gabe say?
Yeah.
A gift to the people?
Books are a friend of
A
humanity.
friend of humanity, yeah. So you can you can buy a Richard Serra book. I know it's not the same as standing inside of like a giant installation or something,
or like
but
Everybody can buy a
Puffing.
book.
Yeah. Unless it's out of print.
It's democratic. That's true. But if it's out of print, then it gives license for people like us to be like, hey, let's either will this back into print or try to get the rights to print it ourselves and like publish it or bootleg it.
I know. I kind of can't believe that bootlegging with books isn't more of like
More of a thing.
I think it will be.
I think now
let's
it's
bring
like,
it back.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Bootleg books.
Yeah.
I think bootleg books is a press.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Someone runs that.
Isn't that like Juliet and them?
Yeah.
Aren't they doing
Yeah,
bootlegs?
that's right. Yeah, Juliet and Ashton. Yeah, hell yeah.
Which is funny because
I was
on
gonna
their
say, I thought
shop,
so.
on their web shop, they have like little illustrations for the books, and I'm like, are they bootlegging their own books? Like at first, I was like, what is this thing? Because it was like a facsimile of the thing you could click on to get the book. Anyway, that was a little confusing, but respect to them; those things are awesome.
Yeah, they rule. I mean, even if it's just a great name for a print house, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome. So, Nate, what did you bring for us today?
Brought quite a pile of things.
Yeah, what do you want to
I
talk
don't really
about
want to
first?
get started.
Do you want to start with this? Because this is
Sure.
your work, right? So in
Yeah.
case maybe someone's not familiar with it.
So this is
us
this is
about
like
this
first eyes kind of deal with my sketchbook collection incorrectly
hell yeah.
anatomical. So like I've been keeping a sketchbook.
Great lettering, by the way.
Thank you. That kind of broke my brain.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I've been keeping a sketchbook while working on comics and in between projects. As always, drawing. I think it's like really important to constantly be open to growth and like learning and exploring and like getting to know yourself. And I think in between like issues of Crooked Teeth, I'm like, and while I'm doing it, I'm always drawing. So I'm like just trying to make comics and drawing interesting for myself. And like I I have to do it. I think like you'll see like it's my brain just like kind of like can't not put something down. I'm a very overactive mind kind of person. So like,
are these sketchbooks like around this size? Is this a compilation of different books? Do you have different sketchbooks for different purposes? Or
so yeah, for the most part, most of my books are like 9x12 hardcover. I think they're like 60 pages, and I fill about like 2 of them up in a year, like front to back. So it's like pretty dense. So I'm like usually doing like when I'm really doing like a lot of comics work, it's like maybe 1 a year. So like in the last year, it's been like 1 because I did Dungeon Mage and Crooked Teeth 9 like around the same time I was working on that. So yeah, it's just like a bunch of stuff, broad spectrum of work, like just life drawing, like drawing on location, automatic drawing. A lot of it is just like just spontaneous, like throwing stuff out there. Like I used to just when I quit drinking, I would smoke a lot of weed to like compensate, but it helped me kind of get into drawing more, and like kind of turned off my brain a little bit where I needed some help to just like get into the zone and just like be meditative, in the practice of drawing. And it's like I had lost that over some time, and I found like this was like a really like once I kind of weaned myself off smoking so much, and then like just kind of just got lost in drawing, where that was just like its own sort of state. And now like I just really like to get lost in that, in the page. Still draw from life a lot.
That's cool. We were actually talking literally about that maybe like an hour ago. We were talking about how like smoking weed makes us really unproductive for projects. It makes it hard to like focus on stuff you actually have to do. But at least for me, it's really, I don't smoke nearly as much as I used to, actually pretty rarely now. But I had a lot of time previously where like I would just stay up really late and work on something that was not for anything.
Yeah.
Sketchbook drawing on a big piece of paper on the wall. And it was really helpful for like being able to do something I wanted to do without that fear of like, I should be doing something more productive or more constructive at that time.
And I think when you're doing like comics work, or at least for me, it's like there's, the awareness that someone is going to be reading it or interpreting the work. And so there's like this pressure that I'm like, I have to get this to read the way I want it to be understood and comprehended. And I think when I'm in this zone, it's just totally like nothing matters. There's no pressure. There's no like no reserve. Like it's just totally anything goes, and it's really liberating. And I think like in that like space, I just get to like be myself, and like not that I'm not myself in my comics, but there's still like this like pressure of like, oh, I've got to perform. There's like that element of that to it. So where like in band practice, like I kind of like write about it here in the afterword, just like what the sketchbook is for me. But like,
cool. Did you enlarge the drawings so like some of them were bigger than?
Actually, a lot of them are small, a little bit smaller.
Cool.
Yeah,
nice.
So like,
because I like the way they're cropped, and I was like looking at some, and it does feel like a sketchbook. It does feel like I just cracked that open.
Like that was my goal. I wanted to present this like how it looks in the book. Like these are 2 different size books.
Great.
Yeah, I know. So like this is a smaller book. I can only when I can't find these like Stillman and Byrne like Alpha series hardcovers, like I have to just kind of go for the smaller ones, whatever I can get when I'm like out of a book. So there's some that are cropped a little bit differently, just to
really great.
That. Thank you.
How many pages is this?
This is 88 pages.
So cool.
So I kind of went through 5 years worth of books, so it's like seven books, and I just was like, man, I want to kind of have this be like the cream of the crop of like sketchbook stuff. And
can you articulate? And I've never been able to do this successfully. That's why I'm curious. Can you articulate what it is that like what made it the cream of the crop? What separated it from the other stuff, or is it just an instinct?
Like, I think it was just the drawings that like I either had like a bigger emotional connection to, like either something going on with me at the time, or just like pleasant like line work, like the way the line just sort of like was like interacting with the paper, you know what I mean? There's like sometimes there's that like you're like, wow, this is like an interdimensional line, like this like something like Mobius does, I think, is like he'll do like one line that shows like a lot of different form. And like this book, I think like 40 Days in the Desert is like kind of Mobius at his best, and it's like something I usually will look at before I go to sleep.
I love all his, like, Mobius will do these, like, pseudo, like, what's the shaman-esque type drawing, like space shaman.
Totally.
Like, I love that.
Mobius is tricky for me because I feel like if I look at it too much, I try to draw like him.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like too influential or
Right.
something.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, that's like the thing.
It's
is,
so
like,
appealing.
Yeah, it's like intoxicating.
Yeah, I think it's like fun to play with, but I wouldn't ever try to like emulate like.
I mean, you can't also.
Yeah,
like,
I know. It's like how?
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you're just like, what? How, like, what is this
Crumbly.
guy's?
Crumbly.
Crumbly?
That's how.
Crumbly,
Crumbly.
yeah.
Yeah, crumbly.
But there's
So good.
Yeah, there's just like such a like satisfying quality to his line and the slight
Right.
variations in
Yeah,
here that
he-
make like
He's so good at layering dense line on top of empty space, but giving you just enough texture to where your brain fills in all the blanks.
the contrast.
And
is,
it
like,
doesn't. He's never overworking it, but he finds just the right spots to add in just a little bit of density.
Yeah.
And it really plays so well every time.
And with one line weight, basically, which is
Yeah.
also astonishing to create contour and depth
Totally.
with just that single pen. This one looks like maybe like a rapidograph or something.
Yeah, I was like kind of just wondering like what was he using when he was doing this, because it has such a like even flow, you know, and like
Yeah, there's no sputters and
yeah.
there's no like line tapering.
These
But
are bigger, I think. These originals, I think, are
I saw him working,
larger.
or like a documentary of him working, and he was working with a nib. So I'm not sure if it's like if he only we don't only use one tool, obviously.
Of course.
But,
Yeah.
but it's like it is interesting to kind of track down some of that DNA. And like speaking of DNA, you had mentioned that you're the type of person who like always wants to draw, like has that compulsion, and that was kind of the impetus for this channel, and also the way we've sort of reframed having guests. It's like we weren't sure how we wanted to do it, and what we ended up coming up with is like, well, what makes you want to draw?
Yeah.
Right. And so like that's what we're looking at here, and I think Mobius is a great place to start.
Yeah, Mobius, like, I mean, I don't really feel like I draw a whole lot like him, but it's like someone that I feel like influenced, like, just like my, I do like to hatch a lot, but I don't know that I handle myself in the same manner. But
I love sketchbook zines. There's like some of my favorite books to collect, especially when I go to shows and stuff like that. And this is actually really cool because it's interesting that you brought this stack of stuff. Now I'm trying to like identify the styles or
Trace
like
the DNA.
maybe what you were looking at while
Yeah.
working on the sketchbook, because that's how I do it. Like if I've been reading a lot of one artist, my sketchbook's gonna like vaguely look like that, whether I'm doing it on purpose or not.
right, yeah, it's sort of just like sinking into like that subconscious layer where you're like, I'm on the Mobius plane right now.
Hell yeah.
Do you then actively try to keep your like Crooked Teeth style consistent?
No. I think it's like it's something that always changes.
Okay.
And I'm pretty open to that. Like if you look at early stuff, I'm much more inclined to draw like Blutch.
Yeah.
And like I was a lot like looser. Like this book was like a huge influence on me when I was younger. I got this at like SPX from like Alex Holden was selling
Oh, it's in
it.
French. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you speak French?
No. The only French I speak is like really crude stuff. So
It's amazing how like
parlez-vous foutoir?
it's amazing that curse words
nonsense.
transcend language barriers. But
What's
like
always the first thing
we
you
can,
ask?
yeah,
Yeah,
well, that's
yeah.
what I mean. We can curse in like myriad languages, but if you ask me how to like compliment someone or ask directions, I'm
Or
like,
tell
nah.
speak how you're feeling. Or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is like
Yeah, this is amazing. Like all this brushwork.
Yeah.
We had looked at one book by Blutch called Total Jazz.
yeah.
And
that book's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was just the book I had on hand, I think.
This is David Mazzucchelli's backyard.
That's
Is it really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
I had him as a professor at SVA, and he was like, we were looking through this. He's like, this is my backyard.
Oh, that's
that's
awesome.
amazing.
Like, oh well.
Hell yeah.
I mean, you
So
can
it's
tell
like-
it's New York right away.
Yeah,
Still waters run deep. There's a name for that type of water tower now, and it's
The Ninja Turtle Tower.
it's escaped me. Yeah.
Yeah, this book is really pretty incredible. He starts with like really soupy, brushy inks, and then like just moves into using nib and incorporating nib throughout, and it like just becomes this really weird, like surrealist. I think it was like based on a dream, if I'm not mistaken.
And
Is
it's
this
almost-
one story? Sorry.
Yeah, it was like originally released in like 5 or 6 little booklets about the same size, but
It's really good looking.
yeah, this is like one of my favorite. Pip Plume was the first thing I saw by him, and that was like a pretty.
I'm curious just about like, this is so neat to see these variations of styles. I feel like Western, or I guess at least like American comics, are less they seem less inclined to experiment with style within a single work.
Yeah.
Whereas I think like if you look at Inkle or some of the other Mobius books, it's clear that he's using different styles, different tools as all part of the same story.
It's also like over like a larger scope of time. Right?
Yeah.
Like I think that was like years that they were working on that, and I think when you look at like a lot of manga artists too, like when you compare like when they first started, like with Toriyama, you know, everything's like very round when he first starts, and then later on there's a lot more like of an angular and quickness to the line that's like pretty interesting. And I've always enjoyed like watching like someone develop, like, you know, One Piece, also like watching that from like the beginning be like very round and kind of like well formed, and now it's like this like psychotic like mess of scratchy like energetic lines, and then the, you know, the assistants are holding down the backgrounds. It's like really pretty entertaining to look at.
This is beautiful. I love
this book
book.
is incredible.
So cool.
I love stuff like you could like, this is like your boy Matodi, like you can isolate these little abstractions
Yeah,
within them that are really
it reminds me of Bayer too a lot. You know, this book smells like cigars.
Does it?
Maybe I'm just smelling things. It's so cool. Look at those bears.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is beautiful. I love this a lot.
This book is like just been one of my favorites.
I don't think there's that much Blutch that's been translated.
No, I think it's just Total Jazz. Peplum was translated by NYRC, and then this was also done by NYRC, but it has very little text in it anyways, so
Okay.
I just never saw it.
It starts to look like sculpture.
Yeah. I know there's like a Rodin-esque
Yeah.
quality to his
Sort of like an
his work.
engraving
Yeah,
sort of drawing.
I mean, even this looks like falling Kyriatid, almost like the woman with the
Yeah.
like rock.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was really getting like sculptural elements from this. This is very cool.
Yeah, I have a lot of his stuff in French. It has like Mitchum in there, and like
Nice.
Jimmy Stewart comes out of someone's chest, and like another part of this.
I mean, it's another cool thing about comics. Like, I would never watch a French movie without subtitles on.
Yeah.
But I have some French books that I can't read. I have some Japanese books I can't read. Like, there's still like a feel of it, or that you can get into like a vibe of what it is without even having to read it.
I think too with like, you know, film, if there's some abstract element to the storytelling going on in the narrative, it's harder to follow. I think with like comics, the thing that's like pretty incredible is like, even if there is like an abstract element to it, you're still capable of like following the story because it is like a sequential element like to it. Maybe I don't know, that's
No, I think there's something to that. Like, you know, there was a point when it was only pictures and that was enough. And I think if you're doing your job right as the artist, like, you can just get by with the pictures.
You can at least piece together your own experience of what you think the story might be, which is also fun. It might not be like right or wrong or whatever it was intended, but it's neat. It's neat to kind of use just the connectivity of the sequence to try to be like, I think this is. It's like getting a sense of like a mystery or something.
Yeah, when I was like 10 years old, I was introduced to like, you know, my older friends introduced me to like Dragon Ball. And because I brought like Chrono Trigger over, I was like, "Look at this game! It's really cool."
Chrono Trigger's awesome.
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, this looks like Dragon Ball." I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And they were like, "Oh, let me show you." And they had like some Japanese volumes. Like my friend's cousin was in California, and he like had given him some or something, and he showed me, and I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." And then I just started collecting them in Japanese, and just like it was like this, you know, gateway drug to like manga. So like I would get into like Evangelion, like Blade of the Immortal, like all that stuff when I was like really young, and like seeing some like pretty wild stuff. And like Masamune Shiro, like I was like reading Orion, Ghost in the Shell, and Appleseed all the time. Like I was just like the energy in the comics was like so much different to me than American comics. Like I felt like there was a lot of motion, and that like you didn't have to have these huge pages of text for the story to move on. Or like I was like, you know, I think like so used to like X-Men and Spawn and stuff where it's like it really has to have like the narrative kind of like pulling in, because like the visual storytelling is more about like these like splash pages or like cool looking panels, but not so much about like the sequential nature of like moving forward with a narrative. I'm like, I haven't really like revisited a lot of that stuff, so maybe I'm talking out my ass a little bit, but like
No, I think that's legit, and I've been working on this action thing, and so I've been looking at a lot of reference comics for action and how people draw action and choreography and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find American comics that I think like really does a good job with it, because like you said, they're focused on the big moments, the big moment of impact. But the action movies I like is like hand-to-hand combat, knife stuff.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find American comics that do a good job of like consistently moving a body through space in multiple frames and multiple pages. It's like they kind of meet the bad guy, something big happens, they get down, then they get up and you do a big uppercut, and like that's the whole thing.
Yeah, there's like one punch and it's like this huge like speech bubble about like justice, and you're like, all right, whatever. How dedicated are you to this? Like, you know, I'm like rereading like Blade of the Immortal and like going further than I got into the series when I was younger, and like some of like Hiroaki Samura's like pages are just so beautiful, and like in the way he like captures the violence, and it's like there are those huge splash pages where someone's like cut into like a bunch of pieces, but like it's all these moments in between. There's like a lot of like interesting pacing, and then like, you know, where it's very calm and quiet, and then like the way he does the action, it's just like, you know, someone swinging their arm and then like someone's head is just this like splash of ink, and you're just like, whoa, like it's there's so much movement and fluidity to it, and I've never really like found that to be the case with a lot of like American comics. There's like such a like there's a very like, especially in like American underground stuff, I was just like, oh, there's like, it's like everything felt very stiff. And so like where I was trying to kind of work in that mindset with like doing Crooked Teeth, I was also like, this just isn't like working for me. Like I love like seeing,
Trying to make it stiff, you mean? Is it?
yeah, like I mean, like I just felt like it was very lifeless. Like, you know, I love like Klaus, but sometimes when I look at his work, I'm like, okay, the brushwork is like interesting, but the drawings are so stiff, and it's like
it always comes across as overly labored to me.
yeah,
It
no,
makes-
totally like
The action stuff in American comics makes me think of a couple things. One, it's like you had Kirby, who was doing like big, huge, for the time, took actually stiff art and made it come to life.
Totally.
So he's got his big swipes, but everything is a huge punch, right?
Yeah.
And then you have, flash forward, you have the Image stuff where they were just trying to sell pages, if
like-
I understand correctly. So like Kirby's doing some stuff
like-
that no one had done before, right?
Right.
And
The splash pages are cool when you do them right.
for sure. But I mean, that's where you get the Image stuff. It's like they're trying to sell their pages for 20 grand a piece or whatever. But
Even stuff like this, though, it's like he pulls out the gun. It's really hard to tell what this action is.
Yeah,
like, what
like
is
how-
this? What
how
is
did
this
he-
movement?
you have
here?
to fill in the blank. Yeah.
Yeah, like that. How
He
did?
flipped him around.
But like, what is this? Like, he flipped him and shot him at the same time. Like, it's still kind of confusing. It looks cool, but it's like in terms of moving from one thing to the next.
sure.
Like you mentioned. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No. The only other thing I was going to say was that it's choreography, and that's why it's difficult. And so you just do your brain. If it doesn't work that way, it's just like, nah, I'll just do a big pow, and then I'm moving on. You know?
Yeah. Also, I mean, he was cranking these out at such a pace. Like,
Of course.
I think
you don't have time to rework every jab and kick and
Totally.
whatever.
And I mean, you know, that's probably not the best example of his choreography, Kirby's anyway.
No, I just.
But
find
yeah,
it-
that's what you had at hand. No, and no shade. I'm just saying.
yeah, like Kirby's amazing. You
Clearly
can't
the
deny it.
king.
I think like I like to show, like, I don't know, showing like the action, the movement. Like I've always been like wanting to capture like motion in my work, and I think about like early Simpsons episodes where like everything kind of drags, like the line drags,
Yeah,
it has
the,
this like really rubbery
smears.
like,
Is that what they're called?
Yeah,
we talked about that once before. I think this. Do you follow One Perfect Frame on Instagram?
no.
It's
Yeah.
all that. It's all
cool.
like individual frames from in the middle of a sequence of motion.
Interesting.
But they're like super abstract because it's just like these smudgy weird things.
Yeah, like that's something like I think about a lot when I'm drawing.
These are
action.
great. These pages are dope.
Yeah, this sequence is really cool.
Those were like pretty fun to draw. I was like, I got to draw some arrows on here, I guess, because it's like crisscrossing, and I was like, this is not what I usually do, but I really want to do it that way to show the two like kind of characters, you know.
What family?
Yeah, I know. It's like, this story has been an interesting one to work on.
How many Crooked Teeth have you made so far?
Just up to number 9. I have like the last installment of this storyline finally like thumbnailed and
Awesome.
ready to go. I just had to get this book out of the way because I was just like, I've just been sitting on stuff for so long, and I was kind of like,
feeling.
I had no intention to share any of this, and then I was kind of like looking through one day, and I was like, this is like pretty interesting, and like maybe it's like just this is like what started Dungeon Mage. Like I had no idea what, like someone was just like, actually Eddie at Strangers Publishing was just like, oh, like what is this? Is this something you're working on? I was like, nah, it's just a drawing, and then my brain just like exploded.
Wait, so sorry, this spread here in particular was like, this became the Dungeon Mage comic?
This is just like, I was just screwing around, like, I was up in the mountains with my buddy, and we were like just climbing and hiking around, getting pretty stoned and like hanging out, and like I was reading a lot of fantasy, like high fantasy novels. Like I've been reading Malazan, Book of the Fallen, and then I think he like asked me like that weekend or something, and I was just like thinking about like just reading. I was like tripping on mushrooms, and I was like, maybe I should like do something about that book, or do a story with that drawing. And then like a few days later, my brain just like came up with like this whole concept of just like something that was like fun and interesting to me, like thematically, like that I wanted to work in to the whole story. So I'm like pretty excited to like keep it going, but it is like so much work to do when you're like working on like multiple stories. I'm just like, oh my god, I like totally screwed myself. Like now I'm like, I gotta finish this one thing while I'm working on this other thing. And then I'm like, oh, let's throw this like collection into the mix too, like as if I don't have enough stuff going on already.
Was this cathartic though, to like get this book out and be like, okay, this thing is done?
Yeah, this was like, I have to say, like probably the most satisfied I've been with like seeing a finished product. Like,
cool, that's cool.
And like the 20 years of like self-publishing, and it's also like kind of like accomplished the only goal I set when I started, which was to have a book with a spine. So
nice. I was going to ask, do you think the weight or the heft of it has something to do with that?
I think that was maybe like just this goal that I like finally like accomplished, where I was like, cool, like the thing I had set out to do, like I didn't care about like being published or like anything. I just was like, I want a book with a spine.
That's great.
Whatever it means. Like it just would feel like I had kind of like done something like a little more substantial than like scammed photocopy zines like I started doing.
Paper pamphlets.
Yeah, totally.
Did you get the page lamination?
No, just uncoded letter. Yeah.
Uncoded's what's up. Yeah,
uncoded,
It looks better on camera too. I mean, we pull out so many of these recent print-on-demand books or something are like hyper glossy.
No, I'm really particular about book production. Like if I am at like a store and like I'm looking at something, I'm like, oh, I like the art, but like, man, this book looks like doo-doo. I'm not gonna like spend like $35 on something now.
Right, because books cost $50 now.
You're just like, wow, this is like a serious commitment, and it's like, if I'm gonna read this once, what the hell is the point of buying this?
Especially stuff like this. I mean, like when you can see that the paper that was worked on has like some tooth to it, or you can see when there's a disconnect between like a glossy print paper and the paper it was made on. That drives me crazy to look at.
Yes,
yeah,
same.
That's why I can't really deal with people
I like this.
who draw digitally, not to be like
no,
critical.
I totally understand.
I feel like the line, like the essence and the quality of like the line is like gone. Like you look at something like this and it's like geepy. I don't know how.
Yeah, we did the same thing.
Yeah,
we love GP.
This is great.
Yeah,
these are
I mean,
beautiful.
this is like such an awesome little book.
I don't have this one.
Yeah, The Innocence.
It reminds me of Matsumoto's line a little bit. Oh, this is that same Coconino press.
Yeah.
So, when we looked at the Matodi one. Yeah,
I have that one as well. This is like really cool. Like, there's like, I think the first like Sammy the Mouse was done in the same.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. And like David B.
Yeah,
has, like, some
they did
things in
like
that, too.
Was it? I don't remember what it was. I'm not gonna.
We can look it up. It's fine.
But yeah, Dave B like had some, and then it was because they were like kind of highlighting European cartoonists, I think, and like focusing on that, and that was like kind of cool and
for good reason, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
look at these lines.
I know.
Yeah, crack it open. I want to see those pages.
Yeah,
he's so good.
Unbelievable.
Like, I mean, it's so there's like a subtlety to his line that like. Just again like shows form in so many different ways, like these noses. I'm just like, oh, and a lot of people in cars, so I love that kind of thing. So it's like
it reminds me of the Matsumoto stuff too, a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna bring Blue Spring. That was like one of the.
Oh, I don't have Blue Spring.
I just have a Japanese version because I'm not gonna pay $50 on eBay for a.
Fair, fair. This stuff is so cool.
That's great.
Yeah, I like his stuff. So
cool.
It's so natural, and I feel like when you look, and human, right? Like that's the thing that like I think a lot of us are trying to get across is our humanity through our line. And when you look at a book that's drawn digitally and it's just like Slick Rick, and you're just like, I can't relate to this. I'm lost in it, you know. And it's like a lot of artists I really like have moved over to like digital like formats, and I just like kind of don't connect to the work as much as
I only ever like digital work if it's obvious that they didn't sketch it and it's just like if it's digital work that I think is like sloppy, I think it's fine. Like Colleen O'Connell's been doing these those political things, which I think those are digital as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
But like that works for me because it's clearly like panel done.
Yeah.
I want to say this thing quickly and get it out. That I don't mind so much. But I hear exactly what you're saying. Otherwise, it's like. Also, who knows how many times this line was like undone if it's digital, you know? Like if you're looking at a GP drawing, like chances are he hasn't whited it out and then redone it 20 times.
Totally. Like I think that's something when I watch people's like progress videos of that, I'm just like, oh, like that just doesn't seem like drawing. It
seems like flipping it back and forth. And like, what is this?
It's just kind of a weird labor. Extension of labor, you know, that I just like, I'm not.
I like during COVID got an iPad with a pencil and was so excited to make stuff with it. And then the iPad was like, all your files are potentially lost and corrupted. And I was like, I will never do this again. You know, and I went back to paper and never looked back. But you're right. I think, you know, I saw this meme about AI art that was like, they made a comment that I thought was really salient, which was, well, AI art proved to us that what we respond to is the humanity of the art. That's why we respond to it. And I was like, that's such a good point. Like, that's what it lacks. And if that is its, you know, if that's the only contribution that it proved to us that the reason why we respond to art is because it's made by humans, like the humanity of art is what is appealing to us, then it did us a tiny service in the midst of all of that like nonsense. If that's what you glean from it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's so effective at creating something that looks like something that it doesn't end up like feeling like anything. I remember thinking the backs of these were really cool.
Yeah, so
yeah, those are dope.
I can't remember if I did. This is like a digital collage I worked on. Like I just was doing some weird stuff on Photoshop when I was bored, and then like I just like cut out some drawings and like some guys like in a riot like in LA in the 90s there after the Rodney King stuff, and then some National Geographic stuff. Yeah, it's just I always like to keep it interesting. I feel like when I'm having like a drawing block, also I just do collage.
Oh, cool!
Like,
do you do a lot of collage just like for yourself?
Yeah, I do actually. I have like quite a few handfuls. Just like a handful of them sitting around.
I like using the backs of the books as like a gallery. It's like an opportunity to showcase art unto itself. Doesn't necessarily have to do with the book. I love that. I really do think that like the perfect place for just like your one-off art that you love is on the back of your book. It's such a great calling card to leave.
Like I like to have like bits. Like in the other earlier issues, I have like more like sketchbook stuff, kind of separating stories because there'll be more story arcs. But this one was just like. I think maybe I did that before. Like I did this like top 50 that was kind of like that, and this is like the autobio stuff. But,
so there's always been an element of sketchbook, at least where your thoughts creep in and like you get some of these automatic drawings that you're talking about and some of the sketchbook elements, which is amazing. It keeps a really lively flow to the whole thing. How many storylines do you have going in this book?
I mean, I just have Blood and Thunder going. That's the main one, and then I just have like little like vignettes throughout. Just to kind of like pad out the issue and like, you know, when you're working on, like I've been working on this since like, I think 2010 is when I did Crooked Teeth 5 and I kind of like came up with these characters and I was like, oh, I'm gonna like do some story, and it just kind of was like really juvenile and like not, I don't know, it just was like lacking in like, it was very angsty and it didn't have like a direction. I had no plan for it, and I was like, I kind of liked these characters. I kind of liked where it was going. So when I did the first installment, I did like the first half of it to where he gets beat up in the bar, and then I was like, well, where's this gonna go? Like, you know, it's like kind of boring if someone's just like, hey doofus, like I'm just gonna like slug you, and then like it's because he's like a punk dude, and like these guys are like, you know, racist towards his like Mexican girlfriend and stuff, and it's just like well, where can I go? And so I started like reading a lot more, and
that helps.
Novels?
like
or,
yeah. So I found like a lot of inspiration in like Americana, like stuff. Like I read like a lot of McCarthy, like Cormac McCarthy, and like Suttree was like a big influence.
Oh, that's my favorite one.
Yeah, that's my favorite McCarthy book as well. Like I think like that book is like very human, and sort of like when I'm reading things, I start to generate my own like ideas in reaction to like the emotive response to what I'm reading, and whether or not I can relate to the author and the ideas. And then also like on a visual scale, like it's like my mind is like working, so I'm like kind of like consuming the literature. My mind is like processing the imagery, and then I also have this like back burner of just like ideas that are like kind of like getting activated by what I'm reading and engaging with and stuff. And like a lot of my friends are booksellers, so like they'll be like, oh, you like this, check out this guy, check out this author, check out them. And like that's led to a lot of like really like powerful books. Like I read Hard Rain Falling by Don Carpenter, which is like,
I don't know that one.
just like kind of some derelict dudes like meet like at this party. Like there's like this young black guy who's like kind of like hustling in a Portland pool hall, and then he like winds up at this party that everyone breaks into this rich people's house while they're out of town and like party. And then like one of the big like ruffians and he like kind of have this moment, and then they actually end up in prison together later on, and like checks in with them throughout their life, and then they have this relationship in prison, and it's like really beautiful and heartbreaking, and like and then like follows one of the guys after the prison stint. And I just found that book to be like really like and like just so like I don't know, just like empowering on like the scale of like writing and like how you can like be emotive. So I try to approach this with like, well, like how can I create like characters that are empathetic, believable, and like also like, sort of like, I think what McCarthy does a lot, that's like challenges the readers when the characters are just like doing shit that's stupid. And you're like, you could just say one word and your whole world would change. And it's like kind of wild that like he just doesn't do that. Like I don't know if you read like the Border trilogy.
Yeah, I think I've read them all at this point.
Yeah,
he's one of my dudes.
And I was just like, God, if like Billy just said like something, like everything would be fine, And like In the Crossing is like my favorite. And but I thought it was like so interesting to have these characters that sort of like go against their own goodwill by just like these like stubborn personality traits. And I was like, well, what can I do to like have characters that like have either like experienced like a lot of violence and trauma and then haven't, and then incorporate like this level of intergenerational like beef that like there's like an unawareness of, and like sort of like fighting against falling prey to like your own like predisposed destiny or familial like projection, like and where your life's gonna go. So like I don't know, like story wise, like that like really developed. Like I took a break for like 5 years where I didn't draw any comics, and I just read and drew like in my sketchbooks and like cool. Just developed a lot of stuff that I think like helped me figure out like the voice I want like to put out in my work and stuff like that. So like that was like really a productive period when I didn't like make work from like 2000 or like put any comics out from like I did some like anthology work and things like that, but yeah, I didn't put out an issue of Crooked Teeth or like my own work for quite a while.
I think that's great, and I think it's awesome that like people should know that that's okay to do. Like it's one of the beauties of self-publishing and putting out your own work is like there's no editor saying like we need that next one by Friday, and then you crank some bullshit out, and like I think that's why so many things fall apart after the first like initial spark is gone, is because writers and actors and things are not given that space to kind of sit with something and allow it to become whatever it's going to be. It's like it hits the deadline wall and the story falls apart because you just feel the rush behind the whole thing.
I mean, I think a lot of people like exert themselves like right off the bat, like when they get like a lot of attention and they're like, oh, I gotta keep books going, and it's just like, well, like at what point are you gonna like just burn yourself out on this medium, because it's gonna happen. Like, comics are hard, and recharge. It's like you need to take, I mean, I found that like you need to take time. There is no rush. Like you can just do things at your own pace. And once I kind of finally realized that, it was like really also empowering. Just like I can do whatever the fuck I want. And that's like that's the best part about self-publishing and stuff. You don't have to meet like someone else's ideals or ideas of what is going to be successful, as long as you're kind of like pleased with your own work and like satisfied doing it. That's like,
and especially if you don't have a label or an editor, like imagine you wrote a book and it's a bestseller. So you're gestating that book for like 10 years and you're absorbing your life and you're just like putting it all, distilling it in one book. Then you have a bestseller and they're like, okay, do it again.
Yeah.
Here's a ton of money, but we want it in 6 months.
Like,
and you're like, oh shit. And that's why like sophomore albums flop. You know, it's like this band is doing their thing. They're on the road. They're perfecting their music over the course of years, writing it and touring on it. And it's perfect. And it's distilled into this thing. And then they're like, great, you have a hit. Now do it again.
I mean, music, like, so this is like a collection of show flyers by Sam Reiser and Eugene Terry. Like, that's my old band Nomos. Like, they would do flyers.
Over physics flyers.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Like, these guys were really active and still active in like the punk community.
So what kind of music do you play?
So I played like punk
right?
bands. Yeah. So that was like where I lived there. Like Nomos, we were kind of like from like 2009 to like 2011, like kind of like jokingly like the 538 house band, because we would play like almost every show that was there. It was just like,
what were the cross streets on 538?
Stewart and Varick.
Oh yeah, okay, right.
So,
okay, I used to have a studio right at Varick and Johnson and Fireproof.
Okay, yeah. So when that place opened up, we were like, "This is great! They got dollar PBRs. Just down the street. We don't have to like
amazing.
venture all the way."
We were probably
out to,
in
like,
that bar at the same time.
Probably,
Yeah.
I mean, so these guys were just like, they were in Dawn of Humans. They were in some other bands before, but like when they started Dawn of Humans, they started getting some attention. But what like really changed the game was their band Crazy Spirit. Just kind of like changed a lot for like the DIY punk world. Like they just like were doing something different, really creative. Dawn of Humans as well. Like those bands were just like pushing the boundaries of like what was kind of like this flyer is like one of my favorites.
These are all so good. I love the drawing quality in these.
Sorry,
like,
French guys.
Yeah. Once again, trashing the French.
Yeah, well, you know.
Did you draw any of these?
I did not draw any of these. These are all this is all Sam stuff.
They're so,
and
okay.
then
They're so great.
Yeah, they're like so fun. Like I think this is like from an animation they had done. But like, you know, I had these flyers up around my desk, a lot of them, and like they're just like really always like kind of just like get my brain like, yeah, like that's fun. Like
totally.
It's like just having a good time, being weird. Really like great lettering. Things like that. So I found these books to be like, or just like their works to be really fun and like
energizing.
Yeah, just like refreshing, you know.
Like
there's also a
collage,
a lot of collage elements here too. I wonder
Yeah.
if that's part of it too, maybe.
And just bold, you know, like the impact. It's like
so
it's very like, you know, it reminds me of like we were talking about Tommy Ungerer, right? When he would do stuff for the Village Voice, and he talked about like schlag, this like style of like poster that like comes out of the war era, which is like it just punches you in the face, you know. It's so bold and it has so much action.
These guys were like really doing some fun weird stuff. And always been appreciative of like
New Rio just locked in a new space, right? Or
no, it's the same space.
It's the same space.
Just,
okay.
I used to volunteer there a long time ago. Like I did a comic about, that was like the last Nomos show there. So what was it? I did a comic, like a reporting kind of comic on ABC, and then I met the like hardcore collective, and they were like, why don't you come volunteer? And then I was like, okay. So I started volunteering when I was in college, and then they were like, why don't you come live with us? And I was like, okay. So we moved into like this punk houses in Crown Heights called The Forts, and started meeting a lot of people, and like, you know, I'm like doing comics and like scamming copies, and just like meeting tons of people, giving them out. So like, which is a really cool like period. So like punk was like kind of like very much a part of my work, and like music as well, and like touring, I'd be able to get my books out. Like
sure,
would you sell them at the table?
Yeah, and I would
That's
like
awesome.
go to comic shops and like meet. You know, I think I was hitchhiking out on the West Coast when I met Jason at Floating World. So like,
there's such an overlap between. I mean, I don't know any cartoonists who aren't like obsessed with music on one level or another, or are musicians themselves. Like, why don't record stores still have comic racks? Why Why is these things don't operate in the same physical space anymore the way they used to? At least not that I know.
There's like some like I think like my friend at Academy does like makes an effort to like he's always like bring your comics back. I'm like yeah and like it's just like out of my routine, so I'm not like ever like over in the East Village anymore.
It's also you have to keep like a spreadsheet of where you have books, because a lot of places it's on consignment.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're following these people down, tracking them down for money, and it's like never a lot. It's like $8, and you're like, can you pay me the $8 you owe me? And then they're like, oh, you're nagging me, bro. And then it's just like,
see, this is what we need. We need a distributor to handle this. We need a central meeting point. We need somebody or some people to like operate the middle space there. Where they're the ones handling it. Attention, Austin. Yeah.
I'll just bother Austin for money instead of bothering.
Because he's got so much free time and not doing anything else ever.
Well, there's like some people that did that, like Tony Shenton used to do that. Like he used to actually distro Austin stuff. He would go like door to door, kind of like when I worked at Forbidden Planet. That's how Austin and I met.
Oh, cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like around then, like 2006. So like to like 2010. So we would like deal with Tony. Tony actually would like help out with my stuff as well, but like after a while I was like, this just isn't like worth like his time, my time, and like the funds were like so minimal. I was like, I don't know. I was like, it was cool to have that happen, but it wasn't like doing any wonders for me. So
record stores deal in all kinds of like 7 inches and stuff too, though, don't they? They probably have a system for this in place.
Yeah, I think like if like someone's like down to buy something outright, I'm more interested. Same. Like because it's just like less of a hassle, I think, for everybody. Because then they have to keep a record of it, and like who wants to do that? Like I mean, like before, like
I don't have time to track down every store for like $2.
Totally.
Yeah, just buy them straight up. That's what Gabe
buy
does.
them straight up.
I usually just sell Gabe my comics for store credit, and then I like get more comics.
That's like do it like
which is a fine deal.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, we could talk distro another time probably. Yeah. Do you want to tell us about Geeker?
Yeah, so when I was like 10 years old, the same friends who showed me Dragon Ball, like his mom like got him this book. And I was like horrified but like fascinated.
Yeah.
And I was like just so obsessed with his stuff, and like
he's like a dark prince.
Yeah. It's like
he's the dark prince.
Like I love this drawing, like, and this is like so bizarre as
demonic
well.
MC Escher.
This is so interesting. This is so interesting because I picked this up and I was like, here's the outlier for the style stuff we've been talking about with your work, but then I'm instantly like, wait, no, this could totally be a punk poster. Like,
yeah, well, he did work for like Hellhammer and Celtic Frost. Had him do artwork.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
There is like some like punk metal connection. So, like Celtic, I don't know.
He did art for Hodorowski's Dune too.
Yeah, I did know that. Yeah,
the Harkonnens.
And like Alien, like he worked on
Alien
movies that actually did get made.
I mean, that's his big like his mass media. Tie-in
well,
is that he designed the Alien
Species.
Yeah, I just watched Species recently. Species is awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fun
for way different reasons, but Species kind of rules.
Yeah, so I like love this like biomechanical element of his work. I feel like maybe like Carcass like kind of like use that as like a piece. But it's like it's like a chrome thing with a spine on it. I can't remember. It's like one album. Like. But there's like, I love his work, and I was always like worried that he was like a super dickhead. But there's this documentary called Dark Star, and it's like he's like the sweetest guy. And he's like talking about this work. He's like, yeah, here's his Dune stuff.
Oh yeah.
He's just like, he's like, I just have these images in my head, and I have to get them out on paper. And he's like, here I am sitting with these in my head and thinking, how horrible. Like,
that's great.
And I was like, wow, like it was just really endearing. He's like going around on this little like train track he has, going through a weird like fun house he made in his backyard and everything. Like totally like blew me away. I was not expecting that. And like, like Alien, his work on Alien was monumental, I think.
There really is something about that as a common thread. It's like we have this, it's like it's a reservoir that fills up and it has to be emptied.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, it leads to madness. Like it really does.
Totally. I mean, I think like when I'm just like putting things out from my brain, I'm just like, where does this even come from? Like, I don't even know. It's just like there's like an impulse to make marks and the pleasure of making marks, but then seeing what's going to come from that when you're drawing from like your imagination or automatically. And then like, I think like getting lost in space, like when you're drawing in life, and like kind of understanding the relationships between the world and its inhabitants is like a big thing I've started to like kind of like comprehend is like.
Wait, say that again. Sorry, I was distracted by this.
Yeah. Was that for Dead Kennedys? And then like I got like banned. Drawing in space and like when you draw in life and like you're observing, right? You're a silent participant, and so you get to like sort of like you get like a little bit of a better understanding how everything kind of works together. Or, like
that's
maybe
interesting.
like you kind of have this like appreciation for things that you didn't have prior to just sitting and observing and like not having to talk about it. I'm reading this book right now, which is like really kind of like touching on a lot of things that I've like. Again, like when I'm reading it, the back mill of my mind is like, oh yeah, like when you're drawing on location or like you're drawing like from life, it's just like you're considering so much more and not speaking. You're not like it's almost like active listening but visually, you know. It's like
right.
That's a good way to put it. Like, yeah. What's the book?
It's called The Ragged Edge of Silence, and it's by John Francis. He saw like the oil spill in San Francisco in the 70s, and he decided not to ride in cars anymore as like a point of protest. And he got tired of like arguing with people, so he, on one of his birthdays, just took a vow of silence for the day that lasted for 17 years.
Wow,
and
that's hardcore.
Yeah, so he walked for 22 years and didn't speak for 17, and like went to school, learned how to build boats.
Legit.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
He's currently walking down Africa.
Wow,
pretty wild.
Fascinating cat.
Yeah,
we have to link that in the bio for sure.
I kind of like am like pretty moved by it and like want to write to him and just be like how much like some of that resonated with me.
I mean, when you said drawing as like active listening or participating or being, it's like we get closer to our true nature if we could shut the fuck up for a minute and just sit down. And like that's one of my favorite things about being an artist is like I want to go on vacation by myself and go sit and draw somewhere where I've never been. Yeah. And people are like, you can do that. Let's go on a trip. You can do it. You can never do it if you're with other people. But if you go by yourself, you can totally sit and just like observe something that you've never seen before. And it does feel like you're part of the forest for a second. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing.
I saw like this Necronomicon cover looks kind of like this.
So like Tom G. Warrior from Celtic Frost and Hellhammer, like he has this book called Triumph of Death or something like that, and it's just like his like story of how he kind of came to start this metal band, and he has all these like really wild like sigils and drawings he did for bands and like his own projects, and I was kind of like inspired by that, and a friend had said like, why don't you do something simple instead of like something crazy for the cover because everything else inside is crazy. And I was like, well, that's a good point. So I was like looking through that and kind of got like motivated to do like a weird like sigil or like emblem that was just like I was like looking at a lot of like ornamental
ritual magics,
like kind of just design books, with like the weird ornaments like over like letterheads and, stuff like that. So I was like, okay, like what can I do that's like sort of in line with what I've been like doing, and I was kind of like thinking about like chaos and like the symbol of chaos that Moorcock I think came up with that for the Elric series, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know.
And I was just like, what is drawing for me? Like when I'm like putting this stuff down, and I was like, it's kind of like harnessing chaos from like this other like dimension of my person, and like just being like, cool, like you're manifesting this, like, and it's like, but also it's not like turning into anger or like violence. It's like, it can be violent on the page and like satiate that like bloodlust from like the frustration and anger at the world and like this crazy route we're choosing to go down as human beings. And it's like, but there's so many other options that we like refuse to like explore because it's like it's not like financially
profitable.
It's not realistic.
Yeah,
it's not realistic. But really, it just doesn't make the top 0.01%.
But all we have left are like these types of outlets that we can return to. Like I always find drawing my sketchbook to be this sort of like safe, comforting space.
Right.
And like maybe it's full of punching people in the face or it's full of naked people or whatever, but it's like it doesn't matter what the content is. It's like the act of doing it is cathartic.
Yes.
And comforting and like warming and it's assured in some way.
Yeah. I think like speaking of like dissatisfaction, anger is a good way to go into David Wojnarowicz, and like I love this book. I think like James Romberger's work is just like unreal, and like this is like I found this to be like a really horrifying account and like really challenging
I remember this book.
to read, because it tackles some really hard stuff, as his life was like very hard. But to see it visually represented and the style is like really grotesque and like adds like a new element to it. I think like I read Close to the Knives more recently, which is like...
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
I love this one.
I've never read this book. I've seen it on the shelf. I've never looked at it.
We looked at this in my very first comics class with Keith Mayerson. He brought this
cool.
book
Yeah.
in and was like,
He's
check this
awesome.
out. Yeah, he was great. And that was my first comics teacher.
Yeah.
But we looked at it then, and I haven't seen it since. And I remember him explaining it to me. And he's like, he wrote a book called Horror Hospital, I think it was called. Anyway, he was like, this was a huge...
Horror Hospital.
I think it was called Horror, or I'll have to retcon that. But
Okay.
But he was like, this was a huge inspiration for his book.
Cool. When was this made?
I think in the 80s or 90s?
2012.
That's like the...
I don't see the original.
This covers his, like, he had terminal illness, is that right?
Yeah,
And-
he had AIDS.
Yeah, that's
what I
thought.
So, yeah, he's like... So in Close to the Knives, there was like some stuff I read in that where it was like the desire to, you know, he was talking about like imagining going up from behind a police officer and like pulling out the gun and shooting him in the back of the head. And like, I probably shouldn't admit to like how much that having someone else like write that fantasy down was like such a cathartic and like monumental moment in like understanding and like being like, yes, like this, like authority is problematic, right? Like, and I think
for sure.
in a lot of different scales, and like that having someone voice like, you know, like, I mean, he clearly has a lot of right to be angry, and I think like especially like growing up through that like time period and watching all his friends die, and like
Yeah, it's so
like,
rough.
that's like some of the hardest parts of like reading Close to the Knives is like him describing watching his friends like waste away, and
Oh
like
my god. So this is the 90s.
yeah, so
Okay.
So at least puts some kind of mark on it when it was...
because I think he passed away in the mid 90s, but
This is wild. So this is a collaboration between the writer that we're talking about,
yeah, Wojnarowicz and then
Wojnarowicz, and a separate artist.
James Romberger.
Okay,
yeah.
James Robert. I mean, this art is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It looks
like,
so good.
his layouts are just like
Yeah,
so creative,
totally.
and so interesting.
So jam packed and
Yeah.
mixed, but also read really clearly.
Yeah, there's a really nice flow. Like, I mean, like just over, down, and like you just keep going around. Like that's like
Just a slight
Yeah.
tilt of that car of the seat
Yeah.
just brings you right back over here. I was thinking while you were describing that, just like so many of these things are so out of our control. Like these things are so big. These institutional failures and manipulations and exploitations are so enormous that sometimes it's just like being able to control what you're doing feels cathartic and feels like a relief almost. It's like I can't control what the president's doing. I can't control what other countries' military governments are doing, but I can control whatever's going on right here.
Yeah.
I'm in full control. And especially once you reach a point where I think we all are, where like we feel really confident, really comfortable in drawing, that's like it's like flying. It's like when I'm here,
Yeah,
I can
right.
do anything. I'm making all these decisions, and just being able to be in control of your environment, even just for a little while in this sort of fictional circumstance,
Yeah.
It is like
feels
a superpower.
good. Yeah, it feels like
Yeah.
you're like stopping time, and you are being able to manipulate things in ways that we can't in these bigger global ways.
And you also get to leave something for posterity. You get to at least like demarcate your time and say like, I was here, I had this thought in response to this thing,
Yeah.
and leave it for an audience that it may not even be born yet. Like that's an important thing. I mean, I have to say that because I'm biased towards it. That's what I do. But I mean, that is the fuel that keeps me going. It's like I'm leaving little breadcrumbs
Yeah.
for future generations to find, and I hope that they last. Like,
Well, I think that's what's
really
like
cool.
so powerful about his work, is it's just like, you know, there's so much active, like this is
Whoa.
like, so like this is one of the, I think, drawings that just kind of changed like something in my mind where I was like, whoa, you can really just go nuts. Like, like, you know, I think that's like something in college that I
Did you go to SVA? Did
I
you
went to
say that?
SVA, yeah.
Okay.
And I think like there was such like, I don't mean to diss on any of the teachers that I had that I really liked, but like there are some that were really pushing like for this really like plain sort of like non-explosive sort of approach to making work, where it's like this very mundane and boring, and it's like, well, why would you want to make like something like that when you can do whatever you want? And it's like,
because it sells, kid.
yeah, I guess so. Like, I mean,
Well,
it's
style
like,
could
yeah,
style.
Yeah,
I think
pushing towards the style.
I mean, that
yeah.
last episode was like really interesting, because I think I thought a lot about that recently, where I was like, oh, like, you know, like locking yourself into one thing is not healthy or good, and it's like if you're never going to grow, you're never going to change. So I think when you're like, I feel like there's a pretty broad spectrum of stuff here, and it's like that's only like the tip of the iceberg of what I was like debating about bringing. I was like, oh, I could bring like this or this, and my wife was like, dude, you can't like bring your whole book collection.
Well, we can do one at your house.
We do part
like,
two, yeah.
But that's part of why I think it's fascinating. It's like, it is like you're staring at your bookshelf and you're like, clearly I love all this stuff for different reasons, but which ones do I take as like formative moments in my shaping my visual sense, or like expanding my horizons?
And like,
I mean, this is unbelievable.
yeah, I mean, this
this
is
book rules. I got to put it.
makes
this
me
is,
wanna
like,
draw.
worth,
$20, what a deal.
I mean, it's like worth picking up for sure. Like I remember like,
I'm sure this is probably, is this in print still?
yeah,
I think so, yeah.
I think
Cool.
Austin has it, and
Amazing.
I think I picked it up at Desert Island because I was just in there and I was like, whoa, what's this? Like, no one's ever told me about this book before. I can't believe that no one. And then for years I was like, no one ever talks about this book, until Austin was like kind of pumping it up, I think, more recently, and I was
Oh
like,
yeah. We gotta do a deep dive on this one.
And it's funny. It's easy to rag on Fantagraphics because we just said this recently. Like, they just publish everything. Like, they're just throwing everything out into the wild. But this is why. Like, these things that no one's ever heard of before will sit somewhere, and someone will find them, and that's a real contribution to our culture, I think, to have printed versions of these things that maybe nobody is. It's not a big deal, but they're maybe using the tentpole books or whatever to support just putting all this other shit out there, which is pretty awesome.
That is cool. Like, you cast a wide enough net, you're gonna drag some gems, you know.
Totally. Again, like, this kind of introduced me to Wayne Rovich's writing, and then, like, you know, I again at the frame shop like got a drawing that he had done one time.
Wow.
I was like, holy shit! Like, just this really cool like snake coiled up around a boot, like cowboy boot in the desert. And I was like really moved by that. So like, definitely people should, if you're interested in this stuff, should read Close to the Knives. It's a very powerful book.
Did he draw that one?
Wayne Rolich wrote it.
Okay.
Romberger had nothing to do with that. It's just like essays and like personal accounts.
So text.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, got it.
Cool.
It's just a novel, or like it's not a novel. It's not.
These books are so rad. The book, I mean, like, all this stuff, like a lot of this I haven't seen before, so it's really cool to see this like through your eyes. You know what I mean? And it all is really powerful imagery. It really does make me want to draw. I'm excited again.
Yeah, it's a really neat, wide spectrum, but I can understand how it filters into something like this.
So
for sure.
cool.
Which is a neat. This almost becomes like a connective tissue for all these other things too.
It's really. Anyway, thank you so much for coming through.
Yeah,
Thanks
this is
again
awesome.
for having me on.
Anything else you want to hype up or talk about or shout out?
I don't know. I mean, comics. All right, it's a
Go Team
big
Comics.
broad world. You know, like don't pigeonhole yourself. Be curious. Get into weird stuff. Like, try to challenge yourself. Right? Like, in every aspect of it. What you're drawing, what you're consuming. Like, I don't know.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Best way to grow.
Good words to go out on.
All right, thanks so much, dude.
Yeah, toodles.
Cool. Toodles.